kind of guy with different solutions for different problems? What?
Yeah, I think we're dealing with something infinitely more complex than the simple explanation. I know that sounds crazy, but the simple explanation of the ETH, I have a sense that we're dealing with a whole multitude of things. It's probably more complex than we could possibly imagine.
Well, okay, more complex than we can possibly imagine. Maybe do a little imagining.
Okay.
What areas do you think we could possibly even approach what the answers might be?
Well, again, you can't factor the ETH out by any stretch, and there probably have been visitations, I think, to this planet at some point or another. I doubt that they would be involved in a covert sort of clandestine operation like we're seeing with the abduction phenomena. And, for instance, cattle mutilations would be another one that seems pretty spooky. But I have a sense that we're dealing with a closed system phenomena, possibly akin to a trickster-like energy or a trickster-like force, which is collectively being manifested by humanity under the guise of appearing alien, possibly in an effort to draw ourselves off planet, to get off this rock before the sun goes supernova or before we get hit by an asteroid. I think we really owe it to ourselves to look into all closed system theories and explanations before we get, I think, self-important enough to think that anything out there is coming to visit us.
Now, of course, the late Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung wrote a book about flying saucers back in the 1950s. He spoke of the collective unconscious, which I assume it means humanity's conscious is therefore communicating this information to us. Would you say it's humanity or Mother Earth?
Well, it could be both. I have a sense that the Earth is a living superorganism. I've always kind of felt that. I think you'll find that belief and that view shared by most of the world's indigenous cultures. And, there could be some symbiotic relationship between an Earth energy that's possibly creating or manifesting phenomena and humans. So there may be an interesting, it may be both, and there may be an interesting symbiotic relationship that's taking place.
Well, it may also be that we create our own reality. So whatever reality we perceive, somehow we are individually or collectively creating that reality. I'm not thinking of a Matrix kind of thing, though.
Right. Yeah, and that would be a classic example of the collective unconscious at work. And because if we are all collectively creating this reality and manifesting these phenomenal events, there should be an underlying agenda that we have. And my guess would be to pull ourselves off planet, to seed the universe before the planet is hit by an asteroid, like I said, or the sun goes nova.
I'm going to be really silly here. Can we say then that maybe the collective unconscious caused that great oil spill in the Gulf? Because it was a strange confluence of events. They've done that thing before without a problem. Yes, we can say that maybe BP oil maybe didn't use all the backup systems. There's a story they saved $500,000 by not buying this backup valve. But in the end, it would have happened anyway, no matter what they did.
Well, I think it's inevitable with all these hundreds of oil rigs that we have in the world's oceans. It was bound to happen. We were bound to see a catastrophic, very, very unfortunate accident. And I just hope it was an accident. I would hate to think that somebody would have the balls to take that thing out. Stories are coming out now about the head of BP selling off, I think, a majority of his stock just days before the accident, which happened on Earth Day, curiously enough. And also there's stories of Goldman Sachs, I think, Gene, selling off quite a number of shares of their stock in BP as well. There seems to be something going on there. I'm not sure if this is premeditated. I'll tell you if it is. Someone's got or something has a heck of a lot of karma they're going to have to deal with, because this is really catastrophic, what's going on now.
People died.
Yeah.
Forgetting the impact on the environment and all the natural creatures who are being injured or
people died, you're right.
That's only part of it, folks.
Yeah.
Okay, that's only part of it. What about humans who died in this supposed accident? But, we can get into that. We could get more into conspiracy theories, and maybe we should bring Ken Thomas and maybe Jim Mars back to discuss that. This week, though, we're going into an entire different realm, the realm of humanoids. You brought forth a very fascinating guest. Tell us about him.
Yeah, Albert Rosales is, again, like one of those unsung heroes that's been quietly and patiently compiling data on humanoid cases, and he's one of those unsung heroes in the field. He doesn't go around promoting himself. He doesn't do all the conferences very regularly. I think he does appear now and again. But I've never seen him on any of the TV shows or at any conference. Yet he has amassed thousands and thousands and thousands of alleged reports of witnesses reporting humanoid-type creatures that are non-human. It's going to be a fascinating, I think, discussion, because Albert is really just glancing through some of his recent cases from this year. His cases go all the way back into the dim reaches of history. And although it's probably a garbage in, garbage out scenario, I'm not sure if we can glean too much patterning or trends or data. But I think that there's going to be some very interesting clues that are found in that database that could give us some insight into the kinds of humanoid sightings that are going on around the world. And I'm really looking forward to this, Gene. Albert is one of those guys that I've really had a real respect for. And he's included the half dozen or so humanoid reports from my database have been included in his. And he is he's a top-notch researcher, and I think you're really going to enjoy our discussion with him.
Well, I also noticed that he's had some of his own experiences, some unusual paranormal events. So we have Albert Rosales talking about humanoids coming up next on
The Paracast.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Hi, this is Tamar from Namecheap. We're a domain name and web hosting company, and we really care about our customers. With domain name purchases, Namecheap offers free SSL and free WhoisGuard for a year to protect your identity from spammers. We won't bother you with unwanted messaging in your inbox or upon checkout, but most importantly, we care about you, our customers. Your satisfaction and happiness is our primary focus because your support means so much to us. If you'd like to learn more, please visit us at radio.namecheap.com for web hosting and domain name specials. You can also follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/Namecheap, where we host many great contests, or become a fan of ours on Facebook at facebook.com/Namecheap. See you online.
We want to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our forums where you can talk to fellow listeners. Just go to theparacast.com and click on the forum links. That's the forum links at theparacast.com.
Hi, this is Nick Pope. You're listening to the Paracast.
Albert Rosales joins us this week on the Paracast. Our co-host is Christopher O'Brien. And because of Chris's close encounter of the seventh kind with a scorpion, if maybe his logic is not framed as well, can we forgive that and blame it on the scorpion, Chris?
Oh, Gene. Hopefully he'll do the opposite.
Well, then we can bottle it. But then, you see, the problem is the Food and Drug Administration will come down and say you can't bottle scorpion venom because it's going to kill people.
Yeah, well, there's probably some crazy kids that would try it.
Well, now they're going to try it anyway because they said it on the radio and we're going to get in trouble. Just before we go into syndication, Albert, welcome to the Paracast. Now, in the stuff that you sent me, all the background material, I see that you're not just a researcher, an armchair researcher. You've had your own experiences. Can you tell us when this started in your life?
Yes, I had. Very young. Like I mentioned, I was born in Cuba, and very, very early at my age, I remember having some experiences where I lived in the city of Santa Clara, Cuba, central part of the island. I remember one experience very clearly, which I mentioned it to a lot of people. I was inside my home, and I heard a commotion outside, and I must have been maybe 7 or 8 years old. I ran out, and there was a bunch of my neighbors sitting around there. They used to sit outside and just talk when we didn't have no electricity. And they were looking up over the roof of a house across the street, and it appeared to be like an object, maybe an egg-shaped, multicolored. And everybody was pointing at the object, and they were all screaming, "Americanos, Americanos," Americans, or whatever. They probably thought it was an invasion.
Now,
Anyway,
what year was this again?
I would venture to guess maybe 63,
Okay.
or maybe 62 or something, or around that at that time, yeah. So they all, kind of ignored it after a little bit, and I just follow it. It kind of flew low over the houses, and it went into an area behind my home, my backyard. I ran back there, and what I remember, I stood under it, and I looked up, and next thing I remember, I was like standing there with myself, and it was gone, and I'm all wet. I don't know why. It felt like water. Anyway, it was darker, and it was at night, and for some reason my parents were not looking for me, and I was out there all by myself.
Okay, so this is missing time.
Yeah, that's what I think. I never been regressed, and I never been hypnotically regressed about what happened. But it appears to have been some missing time, and that's not the first time. Also in Cuba, that had something like that happen.
Not the first time. On a previous occasion or a subsequent occasion?
I think maybe a year after that, we were at a beach. Wasn't a tourist section. It was mostly for locals in Caibarien, near the town of Caibarien in Las Villas province. I was out by myself exploring, maybe the sand dunes, and what I remember, they were like, that when the crabs, they have these holes in the ground all over the place. All of a sudden, these crabs started coming out of the ground. What I thought were crabs, but for me, I thought they were kind of big for crabs. They were like huge. They were coming out of the ground, and I was looking at them, and I was all by myself, which I thought was strange because it's a lot of people around there at the time. Then my next memory was being at the end of lying down at the end of an old pier they had there in the little town, which was broken down, made out of wood, and no one ever ventured over there because it's kind of unsafe. And my parents found me all the way at the end, and they couldn't figure out how I got there. Of course, I didn't remember anything, but I never been regressed, so I don't know what could have happened there. Maybe those crabs were not real crabs, you know what I mean?
I kind of think that maybe being regressed may not always be the best solution. We've had lots of controversies over the value of that.
Right, true, yeah. Because you never know what they might make you remember. I heard a lot about that. I'm not sure.
They might make you remember things that didn't happen.
True. That they want to include in their agenda. I don't know. But I don't know if I'll ever actually remember what really happened. After that, I moved to Spain with my parents, and then I moved over to the United States in 67, at the end of 67. The next experience that I could remember was here in Miami, looking out with my sister. We were looking out a window in my apartment, and we saw another object that resembled very much the one I seen back in Cuba, also shaped like an egg, a lot of lights, appears to be coming up and down over the houses. What I remember, it appeared to have some protrusions or some stuff sticking out of it. I don't know what happened. I think it disappeared behind some clouds or something. But I remember I wrote a letter to APRO, APRO, the group that used to be very active back then. I never did get an answer, though. But I was young, maybe so. I joined the Navy, and while in the Navy, I can tell you that back in 77, I was in what they call a Mediterranean cruise, or deployed there. On board a destroyer tender, and I was out on deck. I used to be a radioman, so I used to go up there all the way to the top and just look around. And I saw over in the distance, over the island of Mallorca, the Balearic Islands, what appeared to be a metallic disc, silver in color. It was just cruising along. There was a pair of binoculars on deck and attached to the deck, and I looked at it, but it was quickly lost from view. I was the only witness. I couldn't get anybody else to see it. I had some other experiences. I don't know we have time for me to go into all of them. But,
well, the thing is, maybe we should focus on the stuff that really seems most unusual, most significant, the stuff that warrants further investigation. Certainly your childhood experiences do, but going back to the stuff you had as a child, the missing time and everything, right. Did you talk to your parents or siblings about this? Did they say anything? Do you recall?
No, like I say, they seem to ignore the whole thing, and if I mention it to them, they will either laugh it off or tell me that I have been having nightmares or dreaming. I always, as a kid, I remember being afraid of the dark a lot, and I wouldn't go to bed with all the lights out. I always needed a little light on for some reason. I recall another incident also in Cuba and Santa Clara. It appears that I was in one of those dream-like states. I wasn't sure. I was sitting in the kitchen, and around me there were these figures or people, which I recall were like all kind of luminous, and they were all tall, but they were like human shaped. They were not, your typical Hollywood alien stereotype. They were shaped like humans, and they were luminous. And all I know that they were talking to me. Of course, I don't remember anything they told me. I know that they gave me their name, which I don't remember to this date, and they left me with a feeling that they would be back one day. That's all I remember. After that, I woke up in the morning, and I couldn't recall anything else about the experience.
Now, did you ever think maybe later on that maybe that particular experience may have been a dream?
Yeah, definitely. I thought about that. Kind of a peculiar dream, not your run-of-the-mill dream, but yeah, it could have been a dream.
Now, during the course of the things that happened to you, did you ever see any stories in the newspapers or hear anything on broadcast TV or radio that seemed to vindicate or verify what you experienced?
No, the funny thing is, never did I read or saw anything in Cuba about UFOs or anything like that, any aliens or never. It was only when I came over to the States, and not even right away, I would say maybe 71 or 72, when I was in middle school, junior high school. I went into the library at the school, and for some reason I went to the section where they had UFO books and all and I grabbed a whole bunch of them. And I remember it was Frank Edwards, Jacques Vallée, all the old books. And I checked out a whole bunch of them and started reading them. And that's the first time I really read anything about UFOs. And this is back in 71 or 72 time frame. Never read anything about that before.
Before we focus on your research, Albert, just wanted to cover the experiences a bit more. Did you have any other experiences? You mentioned, of course, when you were in the military. Any other notable encounters involving a UFO or something else?
Yeah, some of them are kind of strange. I guess some of them will fall into the term of humanoids, which I think is a wide range. This is right after, back in '89 when my father died of a stroke here in Miami. We were all most of the family members were at the funeral home that night, and there were not many of us left there. What I remember is it was after maybe 2 or 3, the funeral home has locked their doors, and all of a sudden somebody was knocking at on the glass window at the door, and one of the attendants there went out there, and we looked out. I was with him, and it was a little man. He was swarthy complexion, dark skin, slanted eyes, and he didn't seem familiar at all. He looked like maybe a midget wearing a little suit. He was just knocking, and for some reason this guy opened the door and let him in. Now, after that, he got kind of hazy. Most of the people there were sitting in the recliners, half awake, half asleep, and I just followed the little man into where my father was in the area of the viewing, and I sat in one of the recliners, and I saw him standing by my father's casket, talking either to himself or some kind of gibberish, which I couldn't really make out, while everybody else around the room just appeared to be helpless, just sitting there, not doing anything. We never seen this person before, and my father's brothers were all there, and they just sat there staring at this, which the same thing I was doing.
Okay, so they saw this person. Okay.
Yeah. And after a few minutes, this little person or whatever it was just walked through the door and went out and disappeared. We never saw him again. Now, we all thought it was kind of strange. But that's one of the experiences. Another experience that not personally, but I had a lady here also in Miami call me one night and told me that she had looked out her back door window into her backyard and seen what she described to me as a devil in the backyard. And I told her to, be more specific. What does she mean, a devil? And she said it looked like a tall figure with wings, dark, like a bat. The Mothman comes to mind here, walking around her mango tree that she had in the backyard. And terrified, she locked all the doors, and then I believe she called the police. I'm not sure if the police responded. I think they did. I don't know what happened after that, but I talked to her personally over the phone. I never did go into her home. She refused to be interviewed personally, but she thought it had to be demonic in nature.
Picture this. You're on the phone with a client or colleague trying to explain something visual. A PowerPoint, a keynote presentation, a website. But it's frustrating because they can't see what you're talking about. The solution? Good news. They can if you invite them to an online meeting using GoToMeeting. Then they can see your computer desktop on their computer screen, so you can show them what you're talking about. I use GoToMeeting all the time to collaborate with colleagues and with clients. You can try GoToMeeting free for 30 days, but you must visit GoToMeeting/podcasts. That's GoToMeeting.com/podcasts for a free 30-day trial.
You're in the Paracast. You never know what's going to happen next.
Albert Rosales joins us. He researches humanoid cases and has had some experiences himself, very unusual ones. Co-host is Christopher O'Brien. Chris, you had some comments and questions.
Yeah, that last example of humanoid sighting sounds like maybe the Mothman was on vacation down in Miami or something. That type of report is pretty rare, I would imagine. Humanoids with wings, that sort of thing.
Well, lately there's been a lot of I don't know if you guys heard back in last year in Mexico, Chihuahua State. There were a lot of reports of winged humanoids, similar to the Mothman type reported. Around March 2009, a lot of the people reported a winged creature that resembled a huge bat, but shaped like a man. Others thought it resembled somebody wearing a cape. This is in the 2009 case summaries, which I have. But there were about 3 or 4 or 5 sightings, encounters of winged humanoids recently in Mexico. Of course, there's been a lot of flying humanoids reports lately. There have, including the ones that attacked the cops down in Mexico. I remember that one a couple years back. Yeah, and there's been a 1 or 2 this year already that I know about. A couple of them in California. It wasn't a winged humanoid, but it was described as something human-shaped, like a man, but much taller. Appeared to be encased in some kind of metallic bronze color outfit or something that covered him completely, flying vertically over the witness's house. This is back in January this year. January or February, but it was a very interesting case.
Now, looking back in through history, humanoid encounters, before we even get to the history, why did you focus on this particular aspect of UFO-related investigations? Is it because of your personal experiences or what?
Because I think that's where the answers lie with the occupants or these creatures we're dealing with here, or whoever they are, I don't know. But I rather investigate something dealing with a flying humanoid, a little man encounter, even Bigfoot or what have you, than a light in the sky incident, which I don't even worry about that anymore. I think the humanoid encounters is where the mystery lies. I think this is where and a lot of these encounters are like so unusual and so absurd that it's just I've always been attracted to them. And,
now, you say absurd in what fashion?
Well, some of them just don't make any sense. Like just like that little man encounter that I had here back in '89, and just didn't have. There's no point to it. Like I was talking to another researcher here locally that he said most of those encounters, so-called CE3, close encounters of the third kind, even the fourth kind encounters, appear to be something all like a show set up or put so we could see something that we're supposed to see it. It's something that's not really supposed to make any sense. I don't know exactly what that means, but it's just most of them are totally, I mean,
nonsensical. There's no rhyme or reason.
Right, that's it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay,
well,
so it's basically dealing here with something where something or someone is trying to put on a show for our benefit?
I don't know if it's for our benefit. It's for maybe for us, for those people involved in the incident or the encounter. Most of those people are changed. There's a change within them, I believe, and I don't know if there's for some kind of future, plan. I'm not sure, but there is something going on underneath the just plain C3 encounter.
That's an interesting thing too. Do you think that you mentioned maybe they're putting on a show for our benefit, but you also go back in your studies to cases involving humanoids that go back hundreds or even thousands of years? What's the earliest that you've cataloged?
Looking at it right now, the earliest one that I have, is from Japan. Doesn't give you an exact location, but this is we're talking about maybe 2350 BC. There's an ancient manuscript called Seitoki. It says during the time of the Emperor Tanyo in the year of Monsha, I'm not exactly sure what that means, a divine man descended from the sky using a monster that was emitting light. The people called this man the Master, and he received the name Tankun, sandalwood god. That was the translation. And his country was called Pisan. Now, this is interesting, that's describing somebody that came from the sky with a so-called monster that was emitting light. Nowadays, that's called a close encounter of the third kind. But this is from a ancient Japanese manuscript. And here's one, I have so many, from Ukraine, near a river Satomi, near modern-day Kiev in the Ukraine. This is from the year 10,065. Local residents observed a strange sign in the sky, which just resembled a huge star with blood-red beams of light. This phenomenon lasted for 7 straight days. It was seen only during the evening. Around the same time, a childlike dwarf-type entity was found by fishermen in the river Satomi. This river does no longer exist at the present, by the way. The dwarf was pulled out of the river in a net. The fishermen kept watch over this strange entity until late afternoon and then threw it back into the river out of fear and repugnancy. According to them, the dwarf-like entity was very strange with a much wrinkled face, another, what they mention here, shameless details on his face and body. There's no specifics, but this is from another ancient manuscript from the Ukraine. Researcher Dmitry Labrov forwarded over to me this brief details of the incident. This is from the year 1065, and there's others. There's a from 1125 in Railbach, Freinstein, Germany. Near this town, several witnesses, including George Miltenberger, reported seeing a bizarre entity described as resembling a burning man or a man on fire He was seen running over the hills, spitting fire from his nose and mouth. Some said that they could plainly see his burning ribs. It reportedly remained wandering around the area for quite some time. That could be what they described, but it could have been a humanoid wearing some kind of luminous clothing. You don't know. You never know. But this is from Michael Bugard and John Ferguson, the researchers, their files.
Chris, you want to follow up with some of these early cases, maybe some questions or probing?
Yeah, I remember reading Jacques Vallée's book, Passport to Magonia, quite a number of very interesting cases from the Middle Ages that I'm sure, Albert, you being familiar with Vallée's work, I'm sure you've included some of these reports, if not all of these humanoid-type reports in your database.
Yes.
The one that springs to mind is the one, I think it has to do with like some sort of line that was thrown down from a craft and it got hooked on the steeple of a church, and some humanoid type came down, unhooked it, and the craft flew away. That's the one that kind of springs to mind. There also have been cases, correct me if I'm wrong, where humanoids have actually been captured and in, I think, one or two cases actually been lynched by townspeople because they thought that the being was demonic in nature. Right. Have you had any reports like that where townspeople have managed to capture or apprehend or injure or somehow get control over some of these beings?
Well, I know about the one you're mentioning about the ship with the anchor that dropped down over a church. I'm pretty aware of that. And the other ones, the people that were lynched in France because they were accused of being witches, which this is what happened a lot back in the Middle Ages. People that I suppose had encounters or were abducted and taken to different locations. They were accused of being witches. I'm trying to think of a case of an entity being. I'm trying to find here. I'm looking through my database.
While we're discussing this, can you tell me where to find it?
Well, you could go to the UFOinfo.com in the research section under Humanoid Encounters. Go there and you should find my database there. Not all of it. I have a lot of the updated stuff with me, but there's a lot of stuff there, and there's a section there with ancient encounters. Go there, see if you could see it. UFOinfo.com.
Okay, I found it, and what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to link it from Albert's name. When you click on his name at theparacast.com or forum.theparacast.com, our forums, you're going to go to this database. You're going to be able to see the same cases he's referencing, and you'll understand where it's all coming. Now, as we look at the overall picture here, which is always a good idea, I hope, do you see a consistency fundamentally allowing for differences of human perception between the cases in ancient times, BC, and the ones we report today? Are they all seeing the same kinds of creatures, pretty much?
Pretty much, even though they back in the Middle Ages and ancient times, of course, they were interpreted differently. They were called gods, and they were, and the ancient men did not have the type of reference we have nowadays, which they could just. The only way they could describe certain entities were like a man on fire person, like maybe somebody wearing a luminous suit. They could only see it as somebody on fire. You know what I mean? They couldn't think of any other words to describe it. But it's all the same. I think we're seeing basically the same type of creatures, different types, many different types, not just the little gray Hollywood alien, which is being it's so popular nowadays.
Yeah, but of course the Hollywood type alien, that was basically influenced by UFO books that described that kind of being.
Only after 1980 cases, people started writing about the Greys. Before that, if you look at the Jacques Vallée Passport to Magonia list of cases, and he has hundreds of close encounters with humanoids there. There isn't one case which is describing a gray type humanoid. Now, if you look at the Humcat listing, which I don't think is available anymore to anybody, I think I have most of it. In those cases, which goes up all the way to 1977. There's maybe one or two or three references of gray type creatures, and not exactly the one that's described nowadays. Of course, the grays described by Travis Walton back in November '75. Maybe the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, they were not really grays like the ones we see nowadays in the movies, but they were taller creatures, maybe slanted eyes, and they were wearing uniform. They were not the great creatures that we are led to believe are the only aliens visiting or being encountered. Or I say aliens, but I'm saying entities being encountered in the world.
According to Clifford Stone, we have 57 varieties of aliens that are visiting us.
Had too much Heinz ketchup, Chris.
57 varieties. So you're saying basically, Albert, you're saying that you do not have very many, if any, cases prior to 1980 that are your typical, as you call them, Hollywood gray type aliens in the descriptions.
Well, yeah, now I do, because a lot of the people that remembered being abducted while being regressed or hypnotically regressed say they could recall incidents back in the 50s or 60s or 70s of being abducted by aliens. But these cases would only became available or only became known from 81 on or 80 on, after Hopkins' book, Missing Time, Whitley Strieber's books, where he reported, the gray type aliens. Then a lot of people remember, or thought they remember, being abducted back in the 70s or 60s or even before, and they could remember seeing so-called gray aliens. But these reports did not came to light till after the early 80s.
Now, does that mean that the cases were influenced by those books, or people just wouldn't talk about them because they feared people would ridicule them?
Maybe there's some influence there with the books. Maybe they kind of make their whatever they encounter, whatever humanoid they encounter, they made them look like the way that researcher wanted them to look. Or maybe a lot of the cases that I know that they wouldn't talk about it. There's a lot of people that just wouldn't talk about what they experienced. Yeah.
Fate magazine provides true reports of the strange and unknown. Keep up with the latest on angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, life after death, and much, much more. To receive your free issue of Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730 or www.fatemag.com. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
You've entered another dimension. You've entered the Paracast.
Albert Rosales joining us, talking about humanoid encounters throughout history until the present day. In fact, his database goes up through 2009, and I presume there are 2010 cases he's collecting. Co-host is Chris O'Brien. So let me ask you about that. You're still getting humanoid encounter reports up to very recently, right?
Yes, I have. Recently, I talked to a lady all the way from Australia, a suburb of Brisbane, and she was very concerned. Her granddaughter and a friend of her granddaughter have had several encounters at night, and the granddaughter's house and her friend's house also, with a what we call a bedroom visitation, and ufology lingo. They will encounter a thin creature, tall, not gray, bluish, but very thin. They thought it looked almost starved, but it was very thin. It was shaped basically human, but it was tall. Wasn't wearing any clothing, but they didn't see any sexual organs. It was bluish, but they thought they could see what appeared to be veins, blue veins running through different parts of the body. And he had dark, big, not big, but bigger than human dark eyes. He will look at them and he will walk around their bedroom. And then one night where the granddaughter, thinking that if she slept at her friend's house one night, she wouldn't be bothered with it, they saw it over there also. She wasn't the only witness. Her friend also saw the creature. The lady wrote to me. She wanted advice on what to do. I could only tell her that I have never heard of somebody being hurt. Maybe I lied, but I didn't want to scare the lady.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that in a moment, so just go on. Then I'm going to ask the obvious question.
By an encounter with a humanoid. I told her that the best thing to do was not to, not try to approach it unless it approaches you and tries to contact you first. Let them make the first move.
Okay, hurt by a humanoid. When? How?
Most of those cases are, unfortunately, they're not all of them, but they're anecdotal in nature. There's one that in '67 that I could just top of my head in Brazil. Of course, Brazil has been a place for some reason that these type of cases have been reported a lot. People have been injured or hurt by encounters with UFOs. This is I'm trying to find it so I could read it verbatim for you guys. This is back in 1967 in Brazil at a little airstrip. Can't remember the name of the place, but there was a husband and wife. They guarded the location. There were like guards there, and they saw on the tarmac on the landing strip what appeared to be a disc-shaped craft, and they saw some figures. They looked like men, but they're very thin, and they were wearing tight-fitting light yellow outfits, and they had bald heads, no hair. Their eyes were normal. They were running around. According to the man and the lady, they looked like children playing around for some reason. Now her husband grabbed a gun, a rifle, went inside his room, grabbed a rifle, and shot at one of the creatures. I don't know it's not known if he hit him, but immediately, seconds after that happened, a thin ray of a beam of light came out of the object and struck him. He was knocked down, senseless, and the figures ran into the object and took off, disappeared from sight. What happened after that? He was taken ill. He was taken into the hospital, and he died maybe 2 or 3 days after that. I'm trying to see what they say with the cause of death, but it was some kind of had to do with some kind of a fulminating cancer that all of a sudden just got him, or which I'm thinking maybe some kind of radiation. But that's one of the cases that come off the top of my head that is very interesting. All right, I can't find the. Here we go. The guy's name was he was a 49-year-old man, Ignacio de Souza, August 13, 1967. Might be in the database you're looking at. I don't know if I have 67 there already. He shot at one of the creatures, and a beam of green light was emitted from the UFO and struck de Souza on the head and shoulders. He fell unconscious. The 3 entities entered the object, which then took off vertically, high speed, which would sound like a humming of bees. De Souza not only incurred a circular burnt patch in diameter, but also, upon examination by a physician, was found to have leukemia, of which he died in less than 2 months.
This sounds like radiation poisoning of some sort, doesn't it?
Yeah, but one was really accelerated. Yeah, he died within 2 months after that. This case was investigated by the late Dr. Olavo Fontes. He was a very famous researcher in Brazil. Yeah, I just brought it up here. I have a little image there of the object on the tarmac there.
Now, do you notice instances where people who see these humanoids or get close encounters with UFOs are harmed in some way? Do you see that kind of injury report being focused on any particular area of the country? Maybe it's just some kind of prejudice or something, but it seems to me that South America gets more of these cases.
It seems to me Mexico, used to be Brazil, used to be the hub of a lot of the incidents in which people were either injured or outright killed by UFOs. But however, there's I know of a case in India, maybe a case in the hold on, there's a case in India in which appears to have been some kind of encounter with humanoids, and then a mutilation of human mutilation.
Ooh.
And those are, kind of taboo in many instances. This is, I believe, in 1958. There was a man saw a couple of children playing, and near where the children were playing, an object was seen to land. And some small figures were seen to come out of the object and approach the children. Now, after that, he hid, and he didn't see what happened after that. He left his place of hiding where he was, and when he went to the location where he had seen the object and the children, he found that one of the children was dead. Apparently, he had been mutilated, his eyes removed, anal cavity, just like you hear when it happens to cattle. And the other child was in a catatonic state. This incident supposedly happened in 1958 in India. This is from researcher Jenny Randles from England.
Wow, that's quite bizarre. I've always been on the lookout for years. I've been on the lookout for cattle mutilation cases from India. This is the first mutilation case that I've heard of from India, but it turns out to be a child. That's rather sobering. India does not seem to figure very prominently in most ufologist databases. What are the number of cases approximately that you have from India? Is this something that's fairly rare there, humanoid encounters? Obviously, a human mutilation case would be extremely rare, but how much activity has there been over the years in India?
Well, quite a bit, but you're right. I don't have that many humanoid cases from India. I was talking to a researcher there not too long ago. He said that a lot of there have been cases, but many could be sociological reasons, or people don't come out and talk about these things over there. They're interpreted as maybe encounters with deities. The India and the Hindu religion as a myriad of gods and goddesses, and they're interpreted and at that level, and many of them are not interpreted as perhaps extraterrestrial or humanoid, but there are some cases in the files, not that many. Again.
How about Monkey Man? Remember Monkey Man from a few years back? That was kind of their version of the spring-heeled Jack. He would leap up from the street up to the top of 2- and 3-story buildings and chase people around. I think a couple of people even died from shock and panic. And why don't you give us a brief overview of that particular series of encounters? That's pretty interesting. I included it in my recent book.
This is back in, I believe, 2002. There were many cases around New Delhi, mostly around New Delhi area, but in other areas. But this Monkey Man, there were different descriptions of this entity. Some people described it as short, hairy, with a lot of hair and wearing some kind of brown smock, bright eyes, and he will come and a lot of times the witnesses were scratched or they were extremely frightened. Other people described the entity as being able to jump up, take tremendous leaps into the air, even fly, short distances. but there are many different descriptions. What I know is one pregnant woman fell down the steps upon seeing the creature and consequently died after that. There was another man that was found after an encounter. He was found crashed and he was also dead. They thought he was related with the encounter with a monkey man. Now, after that, I believe there are no more cases till 2004 when they had also in India reports of it wasn't really an entity or a humanoid, but it was like a ball of light that emitted like loud humming, and it will burn the witness. It was like caused a lot of injuries also around the New Delhi area. It was also in the news for a while. This is, I believe, 2004. There were a lot of injuries related to that.
Okay, so it was in the papers in India.
I believe it was in the papers, but I don't really have the reference with me. But it went on for a while, maybe just like the Monkey Man. The Monkey Man was in the papers, and it was even covered in papers here I believe in the UK.
Now, one of the considerations here is, in collecting all these cases, do you ever get a chance to actually go down on the scene to investigate, to interview people, and see for yourself what's going on?
I done that locally on several cases. The most recent one, I talked to a young man here in Miami, Western-Dade County. He has had several incidents of encounters. The only humanoid case was that I could term as a humanoid. He was last year, maybe in the summer. He was out standing in the front of his home, and he saw something coming down the road that to him it looked like a car, but it wasn't a car. I don't know if you know what I mean. He said it looked like a the old Volkswagens, but it had big fenders, but he couldn't see any tires or wheels.
Okay, it looked like the original Volkswagen Beetle then.
Right, something like that, but it was kind of luminous and didn't have any wheels. It was kind of floating over the ground. It came over, it kind of stopped. I haven't even summarized this case yet. It stopped in front of his home, and he was kind of in a daze, and he walked over, and the door on the other side opened, and he saw legs coming out of the car. After that, he doesn't remember. His next memory was being inside the home, sitting and watching TV or something. But him and his girlfriend has experienced other strange incidents in the house, not necessarily humanoid in nature. I also interviewed a boy here in Homestead, who was just south of Miami, close to the Keys. He saw a being or an entity in a field across his home. And of course, that area there on Homestead is a lot of fields, it's mostly agricultural. Is that it was a tall figure wearing a silvery suit, and the interesting part was he had some kind of insignia, luminous insignia, in the chest area. It looked like a badge to him, some kind of inscription, but he couldn't tell exactly what it was.
Sounds like a superhero.
Something, maybe, what do you call that? The Power Rangers or something. But he had luminous eyes, and he was looking at I talked to him personally, to the boy and his family, and he sounded pretty sober, and it didn't appear to me that he was making it up. After that, according to him and his family had weird dreams, of being abducted and stuff like that. But I think he only saw that entity once. I'm still in touch with him, see if there's any more incidents.
Of the cases submitted to you, have you found any that are blatantly false or turn out to be hoaxes after investigation?
I know in the files that I have in those, there are definitely hoaxes there. I tend to include everything that's submitted. Directly to me, I had some people, especially, but they were so outrageous and so, stupid that you could tell right away it was, come on, who are you trying to kid? I had one guy trying to tell me that he's seen what appeared to be a doctor's stethoscope floating around his backyard, following him, trying to take his I don't know, his vitals or something. And he sent me about 10 or 15 emails begging me to include his case. And I call him up and go, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to, are you serious? Come on. And then I think he was on medication or something, but
he wasn't watching the repeats of House on TV too often.
Maybe. A stethoscope.
Yeah, or maybe taking the drug that Dr. House took on TV. He took all those pain-killing drugs. You take enough of those, you start seeing things.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a couple of those. And when it's an outright hoax and somebody is, I don't include it in my files. Like, I have in my files all these 1950 cases, like the contactee cases and like Adamski and some of the others that you can tell, but I include them because there's actually people that swear by those cases that actually believe, they're real believers that there are space brothers that are coming here to help us in 2012.
Okay, so your database here, you're not really vetting everything. You're just including anything that just seems like it might be vaguely sensible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I get a lot of cases from overseas also, but most of those cases have been investigated. And a lot of these cases are sent over to me, and I have to translate them. Many of them I have to translate.
I'll tell you what, we'll get more involved in these humanoid cases on part 2 of the Paracast. Co-host is Christopher O'Brien, our guest Albert Rosales. We're looking at humanoids, connected or not connected with UFOs. More coming on the other side of the Paracast.
We want to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our forums where you can talk to fellow listeners. Just go to theparacast.com and click on the forum links. That's the forum links at theparacast.com.
Welcome back to the Paracast with Gene Steinberg and David Biedny.
Our guest this week, humanoid researcher Albert Rosales. Our co-host is Christopher O'Brien, still recovering from the venom from a scorpion, a very eager scorpion, not an ET scorpion, but an earthly kind of scorpion, the kind you find here in Arizona. Chris, you want to pick up on the questioning?
Albert, first of all, we never really established the impressive extent of your database. How many reports and cases do you have now?
Right now, I will say close to 15,000 already.
Wow.
And I still have hundreds here to enter, and from books like I get from different parts of the world, I got to translate them. And I mean, a lot of these books and journals and cases that I get are unheard of here in the United States, which is interesting. That's why I want to include them, so that way everybody has access to what goes on in different parts of the world.
Isn't that unfortunate, though, the fact that here in the U.S. we don't pay attention to the fact that UFOs, it happens to be a worldwide phenomenon. We don't look at South America. We don't look at Europe. We don't certainly look at Asia. We don't look at third world countries. Very unfortunate. But how do you pick up cases like that? Is it always because of the fact that you have people around the world who are submitting stuff to you, or do you have to sit back and just do all the research yourself? Do you have helpers?
I have a couple people. Yeah, I have some helpers, definitely. Lately, I've been getting help from down South America, Chile, Argentina. I have some. What I normally do, we exchange information. I send them stuff, and they send me stuff. Sometimes I used to have a guy in the Ukraine that I will send him packages every other month, books, magazines that he couldn't get over there in the Ukraine. He spoke English, so he was able to read them, and he will send me cases that he will translate for me, and I will do that. And I had, people from Australia, Poland, Sweden, Germany, many different countries, Canada, help me with the research. Yes.
Well, I remember that's how we met, as you were inquiring about a couple of cases from my database, and I seem to recall that that's how I first found out about you and your work, and I was quite impressed with the way that you approached me and how you asked for the information. It wasn't just send it along or can I use it. It was like you really wanted to know more about it. And I think that's that side of human nature, that sort of curiosity and wanting to know the facts, I think is really important for researchers such as yourself. You can't always take everything at face value. If there is an opportunity to dig into it, I'm impressed that you do go the extra mile and do that. On these cases, communication doesn't seem to be, it seems to be the exception rather than the norm. Most of these cases seem to be just these beings are being observed. What percentage would you say of cases is there an actual interaction with the humanoid type, and do you see any sort of, I don't know, just consistency in terms of what these humanoid types are asking or saying? Is there any rhyme or reason to the communication?
Well, most of the cases in which communication is reported is telepathic communication. And most of these cases are the abduction cases or the abduction scenarios. Many times there's cases in which the main theme here that they seem to communicate when there's their first encounters, they tell you right away, that tell whoever they encounters, don't be afraid, I'm not here to hurt you. No, thank God they say that. And then a lot of these people that claim encounters or abductions are told that they'll be back one day. They're coming back. They'll be back. You'll see me again. They don't really give you a time frame. A lot of people are invited to go with them. And they're told, do you want to come with us? And a lot of the people, most of the people are reluctant or hesitant, and they want to know for how long. And I know cases of people that have been told, well, you'll be gone for a couple months, 3 months, a year. And some people have been told, no, you'll never be back again, but it will be better for you. I suspect that there are people that had said yes and they've never been seen again. Where they're at now, I don't know, but I don't know if you all recall the incident of Frederick Balentich back in '78, the guy that disappeared in a plane down in Australia. He reported a UFO coming close to he had a small aircraft, and it hovered over him, and his last transmission was something that he was getting close, then there was a noise, and he was never seen again. There was a search, and nothing was found, and there were other people that saw that other UFOs in the area around the same time. And there's another similar case in 1980 near Puerto Rico. 2 men in a aircraft reported being harassed or followed by a craft that wouldn't let them maneuver. They were headed to, I believe, Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, or they were headed back to Puerto Rico, I'm sorry. And this craft was following them, and their transmission was picked up by an Iberia Airlines coming from Spain to Florida. And the guy finally gave up and says, no, this craft won't let me go anywhere, and I have no, we're lost. We can't go anywhere. They were never heard from again either. Their plane was never found. His father was a lieutenant commander in the Puerto Rican police, and he spent years trying to figure out what happened to his son. He searched the area by himself many times. Soon after the Coast Guard finished searching, and he never found his son. And there are many cases in which UFOs have directly related to disappearances of people.
Yeah. Well, now we're looking at that here. Is it always possible here that the people who disappeared for a period of time, whether it was months, years, or forever, they had other reasons, other compelling reasons to disappear? Maybe they had financial difficulties, they had legal difficulties, the police are after them or something? Or maybe they didn't tell us and they just disappeared before they were caught?
Well, I'm sure that 90% of the people that voluntarily vanishes, that's the reason. But there's always that small percentage that they have no reason at all for them disappearing, or they disappear in strange circumstances, or like these 2 cases I just mentioned. Or I know of some cases in which people have disappear in the vicinity of like a case in Brazil again. We go back to Brazil in 78, that two cousins, according to the incident, they were picked up by a UFO, two boys. They were maybe 14 or 15 years old. This is in a place called Piranhas in Brazil, and I think the state of Minas Gerais. In 78, they were picked up by a UFO. They were gone for maybe 1 or 2 days. One of the boys was brought back. He was found like 200 kilometers away from where he was originally picked up. His cousin, however, was never seen or heard from again. So apparently they let him go, and they took his cousin with them. And this case was verified by local researchers. There's a lot of the information, and like you say, in South America and some of the other parts of the world, in the former Soviet Union, and all those places that we never hear from, and we totally ignore over here. You know, like I said, in my opinion, the general public, most of the public, doesn't have a clue of what's going on.
That's true. Especially Americans seem to have blinders on when it comes to, they think American reports are the only ones that matter. And I think some of the most, if not the most compelling cases do not come from the United States. I think they're rather cookie cutter here, as opposed to South America, as you mentioned, or Europe, like Eastern Europe. They tend to have much more bizarre reports, like the Varginha case. What do you make of that particular case?
Well, maybe explain to our listeners first, because we've had A.J. Javert on the show a couple of years back talking about Brazilian cases. But before we look at the implications, maybe, Albert, remind our listeners what it's all about.
Varginha case in Brazil back in 1996, yes, January. There was a reports. First, there was a report of a UFO that appeared to be in trouble. There was smoke coming from it. A cigar-shaped craft reportedly crashed. A little bit soon after that, some girls in the outskirts of Varginha, a place called Jardim Andere, reported encountering several creatures in the bushes, that they were like short, with little ridges on their head, big heads, red eyes. Again, they were not grays, totally different from grays. And these were apparently the survivors of a crash. There was police and military activity in the area, and supposedly the Brazilian military captured and was able to recover some of these creatures. During the incident, some of these soldiers came in close contact with the creatures, and one of them reportedly died as a result. He developed some kind of disease or condition that could not be corrected, and he died shortly after. And this case is one of the most compelling that I think when it comes to possibly a crash. I think it's even more important than Roswell. I mean,
the creatures were spotted. Reports were coming in 2-3 months later.
Right.
That, supposedly one of the creatures was not captured and was seen lurking around the area. Also, there was quite a bit of speculation that somehow officials from NASA, I think, were seen going into the hospital. We have reports of an autopsy that supposedly was done. What is the state of the case now? I mean, have we learned anything about the 98, 2000 point on? I think that's about when the case sort of faded away in most ufologists' minds to some extent. But have you heard of any other new developments? Has anyone come forward from the hospital or from the military?
Last I heard was several people involved in the hospital, like nurses and doctors. They sort of confirmed the incident with some of the Brazilian researchers, like Gavard and a couple other guys, and they spoke more about the death of the soldier that came in close contact, and there was more details in that. I've been trying to update that case, and in my files, I still have a stack of stuff here to do, but as of 2000, in the early 2000s, there haven't been too much out of that case. Much more new information, I meant.
Is there a secret UFO agenda? Do strange creatures from the darkest corners of the mind roam the earth? Is there evidence for mind control, time travel, or devious government conspiracies? Find out the inside scoop on the latest conspiracies, paranormal activity, and Fortean phenomena when you subscribe to Tim Beckley's Conspiracy Journal. It's jam-packed with stories, special book and DVD promotions, and the best news, it's absolutely free, sent right to your mailbox. Plus, a bonus free email newsletter sent out every Friday. Simply send an email with your name and address to MrUFO@webtv.net. That's MrUFO@webtv.net. Find out what they don't want you to know.
You're in the Paracast. You never know what's going to happen next.
We have Albert Rosales, an experiencer. He's had unusual encounters with this, that, and the other thing through his life, and also a researcher into humanoid cases. Now, maybe we look at the end game here. Have you reached any conclusions? All this data you have there, and we realize some of it may not have been fully vetted. Some of it is just there for the sake of historical record. But have you begun to think what might be causing all these reports of humanoids throughout history?
I don't know, but I think we might be reaching some type of, like you call it, an end game, because it's been going on for so long, if you think about it. We go back thousands of years. This type of incidents of encounters, is it going to go on forever? I don't know. It seems like it has. It seems like, if my belief that we on Earth there have been other civilizations before us, and for some reason they have come to an end, and some other civilization has started. Maybe it's our turn to go. I don't know. Maybe it's coming to a point when there's going to be some kind of like they call it Earth's change. I don't know, but I think there's got to be a point to all of this. Exactly what it is, I wish I knew.
Well, having even considered that possibility, do you see things in maybe the information that's communicated by the entities to the witnesses that might indicate some kind of purpose? That's assuming, of course, it's not all deception, which it might be.
Well, you guys, of course, remember the Chilean earthquake this year? In 2009, there was a case. If you look at my 2009 file, it should be there, a case in August in France, in which the witnesses were told that to watch out for the date February 28th or 29th, that there was going to be a major catastrophe. Watch out for in 2010, February 28th, 29th, which of course it did occur. There was definitely a major catastrophe. Of course, they didn't mention anything about the bigger catastrophe of the Haitian earthquake right before that one, early January. I think that these entities have the ability to tell what the future is going to bring or is bringing us. But that's in the 2009 file. They apparently they were able to describe exactly what was going to happen, and the case was written down before the earthquake. It wasn't done like after the earthquake. It's in the 2009 file, I believe, August.
It kind of reminds me of John Keel being told that there was going to be some cataclysmic occurrence. I think it was the assassination of the Pope, if I recall, on a particular date, and it turned out that that's when the Silver Bridge collapsed.
Yeah, he was lied to. He was told several things that never happened, and then the bridge collapsed, and he had some kind of I don't know, some kind of they give you little hints and pieces here, but when the true event comes around, you don't know.
Is that very prevalent? Is that something that happens a lot? Some sort of prophecy being handed over to humans by these humanoids? Or is that pretty rare?
Well, it's been pretty prevalent. It was pretty prevalent back in the 90s, 89, in Eastern Europe. For some reason, right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a humongous wave of encounters with humanoids and entities from 89 to 1991, and all that region there, Russia, Ukraine, all the former provinces of the Soviet Union. And a lot of these encounters, the witnesses were told by the entities about future coming. They mentioned global warming, they mentioned coming wars, catastrophe. It's been pretty prevalent. Every time there's an encounter with aliens, not every time, I mean, a lot of times when there's an encounter with aliens or supposed aliens, they sort of hint to coming disasters. It's more prevalent than we think, actually.
Well, that gets to be the whole thing about deception, where creatures come down, they say something, and sometimes it comes to pass, and sometimes it doesn't. But the thing that bothers me about the whole thing is the fact that it's gone on for so long. I mean, if E.T. comes here in a starship, and they set up a base on the moon or whatever, and they send their scout ships over here, and maybe occasionally they crash, and you think, for thousands of years, they're coming here, going back and forth to whatever, but we can't nail it down. Isn't there something that might indicate maybe they're closer to home than Zeta Reticuli?
You know what? My feeling, my theory that I like to espouse more than the extraterrestrial theory is that maybe we're being visited by people from or beings from other dimensions, other universes within ours, from other dimensional planes of existence, that there might be hundreds of them in our own little Earth here, in our three-dimensional world. Maybe there's about 100 dimensions that we don't see, and once in a while somebody or something from one of those dimensions is able to cross over and wreak havoc here with us.
Yeah, maybe we're the UFOs in their world.
I know of cases that it seems to indicate that these creatures are able to appear suddenly from what appear to be portals or into your room. They say that you're sleeping in the bed and all of a sudden some kind of portal materializes in your bedroom, and out of that portal somebody walks out, and then there's interaction with that creature, and you first think it might be an extraterrestrial, but not necessarily. Maybe we're dealing with interdimensional beings.
Or they might have a matter transporter, just like Star Trek does. They're experimenting with that in the test labs now. Yes, I heard, and also invisibility. All of a sudden they become invisible, like some of the Bigfoot creatures that have been reported. And for some reason they're seen running down the field. All of a sudden they disappear and then they appear again. I heard of cases that way. I know of a case here in Miami. The lady was lying on her couch watching TV. All of a sudden she was unable to move, and from her window, what appeared to be the window that led to the street, something that resembled a TV screen floated in and hovered over the bedroom floor, and out of that TV screen a figure climbed out. It looked like a man wearing a uniform, coverall with a helmet, visor helmet. She couldn't see any facial details. She wasn't able to move. All of a sudden she kind of was able to move for some reason, and the man stepped back and he hit a button in his shirt or his coverall, and he jumped back. According to her, he's kind of somersaulted back into the TV screen thing and disappeared into there, and then it floated out the window again.
That's a bizarre one.
Of course, we could also look at sleep paralysis or something.
Yeah, kind of an unusual one. I've been involved with sleep paralysis incident here, which you're laying in bed and you're unable to move, and you swear you hear somebody walking around you, but you're unable to move, but you swear that you're awake. You hear noises, and all of a sudden you're back to reality again. That's happened to me several times.
But this phenomenon of winking in and winking out of our reality, you almost wonder sometimes if this is like a holographic projection. I mean, if you look at the Star Trek series, mostly in Star Trek Next Generation, the holodeck, where they can go in there and the computers create an artificial reality that seems real. Now, that artificial reality, well, okay, we're projecting something that will happen 300 or 400 years hence. But an advanced civilization might be able to do that now. How do we know that what we see is really there and not some kind of movie or show for our benefits?
No, we don't. We don't really know. Some of these things appear to be, just totally holographic in nature. Like some of these creatures, they've been seen. You can see it from the front, but then it appears to be one-dimensional. It turns around and there's nothing there. I seen of cases. I heard of cases like that.
Yeah, that's how my case went. When I was little in '63, the same year that you had your first encounter, I had a group of humanoid type entities that followed me around my neighborhood, and at one point I had stopped to get a good look at them and watched them come underneath the streetlight as they were following me, and they turned sideways and came through the light like pieces of paper, like they had no depth. Right. It was the weirdest thing. Wow, that terrified me. Is that a detail that you've encountered in your database? Is that something fairly prevalent, or is that pretty rare?
Not prevalent, but I know of several cases that kind of case.
That people report two-dimensional.
Right. That they appear to have no depth, and or sometimes they're see-through. They come in and out, like of visibility. And another occasion, there's been cases of that the creatures appear to morph into a different form. You heard of those?
That must be pretty rare. I've never heard of a case like that. You mean they take it on a different humanoid type form?
Yes. There's a couple cases. One from Israel, which is there have been a lot of weird cases there, and not too much known also here in the United States. And there's a database of Israeli cases. Unfortunately, is in Hebrew. And I was able to translate a little bit, but some of the cases there's one case which a couple in Tel Aviv came upon and this is inside their home, a short, big-headed gray-type creature, and they're walking in their room, and they follow it, and all of a sudden it seemed to morph into a tall, blonde Nordic type, and then it disappeared out through the wall. That's bizarre. And there's another case in which a witness supposedly was abducted on board a craft, and she was confronted by a tall, blonde Nordic, but this Nordic type seemed to be fading in and out, and behind it, she saw what appeared to be a reptilian, or kind of a reptile-looking being. It's kind of weird.
Hi, this is Tamar from Namecheap. We're a domain name and web hosting company, and we really care about our customers. With domain name purchases, Namecheap offers free SSL and free WhoisGuard for a year to protect your identity from spammers. We won't bother you with unwanted messaging in your inbox or upon checkout, but most importantly, we care about you, our customers. Your satisfaction and happiness is our primary focus because your support means so much to us. If you'd like to learn more, please visit us at radio.namecheap.com for web hosting and domain name specials. You can also follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/Namecheap, where we host many great contests, or become a fan of ours on Facebook at facebook.com/Namecheap. See you online.
You're in the Paracast. You never know what's going to happen next.
Before we get too weird, Albert Rosales and the very weird, recently stung Christopher O'Brien as co-host. I'm not going to stop harping on that, am I?
No.
People harp on me all the time, so I am going to get my revenge. Okay, so, Albert, we have all these cases of people winking in and out, and we have all these things, and maybe we want to go back to Carl Jung's collective unconscious, and maybe we're generating these illusions for some higher purpose?
That's also a possibility, yeah. Collective consciousness. I think John Keel called it the super spectrum, didn't he? He thought that this whole thing was some kind of everything was connected, all kinds of entities, Bigfoot, winged creatures, Mothman, humanoids, UFOs. They're all part of a so-called super spectrum that was in contact. I mean, it was connected with humans somehow for some purpose.
Yeah, just to mess with us.
The trickster.
Pull us forward. Yeah, the trickster, exactly. That's why I wrote the book, Stalking the Tricksters. There's so many cases that I personally have investigated and countless cases that I've heard of from credible researchers and investigators that, you touched on this at the very beginning, Albert, that it's nonsensical. There's just no rhyme or reason for why cases occur the way they do, why these entities do the things they do, why they telepathically sometimes communicate nonsensical information, ask just totally bizarre questions. There is a tricksterish quality to many of these cases, and I really feel that trickster definition, it makes as much sense as pretty much any of the other explanations that are floated out there, especially the extraterrestrial hypothesis. One thing that we haven't touched on, you just mentioned it briefly here, in terms of an observation of one of your witnesses, reptilian cases. How are they prevalent? Where do they mostly occur? Do you see any sort of patterning with these types of descriptions? Do you know when they really first started? When in your database you first start to see these types of reports? What do you have to say about these reptilian cases?
Well, they've been reported before. Early in the 70s, perhaps in the 60s, but these cases with so-called reptilians are mostly prevalent here in the United States for some reason. But you remember the case back in '72 of the two police officers in Ohio? They saw that reptilian-type creature on the side of the road. This is March '72. It was seen by two police officers twice. And then there's another case in New Jersey in '74. A guy driving down the road, he saw a big figure standing on the side of the road. He looked at it closer, and to him, he looked like a big reptile with red eyes and scaly, body. And these cases were like in '74, '72, which were, back then there wasn't talk of reptilians and overlords or whatever. And then in the late '80s, people started talking about encountering reptilians while being abducted, and then we have some researchers that focus into the reptilian side of humanoids, like David Icke and some others. But they seem to be prevalent here in the United States, reptilian encounters. I know one case here in Miami, but it was more like a morphing entity again, which at first it was a woman, tall, black-haired woman inside the house that seemed to morph into a reptilian creature. And at the same time, there was a UFO hovering outside. This is back in '83, but
that raises a wider issue here too, and this is something that John Keel has mentioned, that if you look into the areas where people see lots of UFOs, strange creatures, whatever, lots of other crazy stuff is going on, but we're so focused on the UFOs we don't think about the poltergeists or the ghosts or the strange creatures. So in looking into these cases at all, do you see evidence that this is just the tip of the iceberg?
Yeah, in many instances when there's a UFO encounter or a creature or entity encounter, there's other stuff going on. Like you say, there's poltergeist activity, whatever that means, I don't know. There's mutilations, domestic animals, farm animals. There's other encounters. There's strange people visiting the witness or strange phone calls. There's a wide range of different incidents, and most of the cases when there's encounters with entities. I'm not saying all of them, but there's also there's even cases when people mess with Ouija boards, and they try to call in an entity or a UFO. They had encounters with strange entities or UFOs right after their little Ouija board thing. I know. I never tried a Ouija board, but
be careful what you wish for.
I have tried that when I was very young. Not that young, maybe 18 or 19. A close friend's mom had extraordinary experiences with it. But again, I tend to think that just you're subconsciously just moving the planchette around.
Yeah. I don't know. One time I think I attempted it with some of my family members, my sons. But we had a couple wines, so I don't know if it could be an experience that was really. But no, I didn't get anything from it, so I don't know what to tell you.
I tried it once with some friends when I was a teenager, and it just kept saying no.
All right.
It didn't matter what we asked; it just said no.
It knew what you were doing because it said no.
Well,
yeah.
Maybe that's a good idea. I heard that sometimes when you mess around supposedly with a Ouija board, you might bring in something from the other side that you don't want.
Yeah, lower vibration type energies. Yeah, it's not something to mess around with if you're not real spiritually strong. If you have any sort of spiritual twitchiness, it could bite you.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't investigate that. But then if we're looking into all these other auxiliary or complementary events, that makes things pretty complicated. Let me ask you here, because we only have the last half hour to go here, and some of our listeners will ask about your background. So basically, tell us about your professional background, what kind of work you've done. I understand you were in the military at one time, right?
I was 4 years in the Navy. I was a radioman. I had a top secret clearance. I was there from 76 to 80, and I got an honorable discharge. I remember while in the Navy, I used to be subscribed to, remember that old UFO magazine, Saga, the Saga UFO magazine?
Well, then you read some of my stories. I wrote a couple of articles there.
You did?
I did indeed.
Your name was familiar, maybe from the magazine, from Saga, yeah. Yeah, and I used to get it at the naval base, and one time I was called down to the chief, and they had opened my mail, and they asked me why was I interested in this? Why did I read this magazine? There were a bunch of guys standing around there, and I go, well, I told them it was my hobby, that I was into strange stuff and UFOs. They kind of laughed it off, and they gave me the magazine back. But after that, when I left the Navy, I worked with my father for a while.
You worked with your father. What was he doing?
He was a jeweler, jewelry, and but he got sick and he died, like I said, in '89. But already then, I already joined a local. I work for the local government here in Miami-Dade. I've been working there for 27 years.
What is your function?
That's all I would like to say about that. Because I don't want to mention the entity that I work with.
Fair enough. We don't want to get you in trouble either. Do they occasionally come to you and say, Albert, this stuff's a little bit crazy. Why are you involved?
No, not really. I keep it pretty low key, and they're pretty much they don't bother me.
Does that connection help you research some of this stuff?
I try not to mix. I try not to mix my work with my research. If I hear anything related there, I later on maybe I attempt to follow up, but not connected with my work. No.
Now, you have a family, you have kids, a wife.
Yes, I have a wife.
Have they ever had any experiences?
Two of my sons have. My middle son, Alex. He in my other apartment where I used to live before I moved over to my new home. This place was kind of weird. You'll be sitting here at the computer, and you swore there was somebody standing behind you. You would look back, and there was nobody there. Anyway, he told me that one day he saw a man wearing what appeared to be a brown monk's habit in one of the rooms, which is weird. And before that, at the other house, he was in his room sleeping. All of a sudden, he woke up and he saw what he described to me, what looked like an older lady, standing in the room, looking at him. She looked normal, except he could only see her from the waist up. no legs, or only the waist up. He was standing there, or floating there, looking at him. And one of my other sons seen what he described to me as a luminous disc-shaped object outside the home one time, which I didn't see.
How old were they when these things happened?
Maybe 18 for the first one, and the other one was much younger, maybe 10 or 11 or younger than that, 9.
Okay, looking at influences, were they aware that you had unusual encounters when you were young?
I never talked to them about that until they were older. They knew that I would read. I used to have a large collection of books, magazines. I still have, and I lost half of it. And they knew I read books about that, and I will get magazines on it on the mail. Yeah, but they knew about my interest on the subject.
Yeah, that reminds me of my childhood when I was growing up. My father was in the Coast Guard in the mid to late 40s in Puget Sound. I grew up in the Seattle area, and I recall him mentioning to us that they had just gotten new radar units and that they had seen these objects flying incredibly fast. They estimated about 10,000 miles an hour. And at one point, they felt that they were going in and out of Puget Sound up near the top of the San Juan Islands. And I remember that always had a real impression on me. And I always wanted to see a UFO, but during the whole time I was, in the home, I never got a chance to see one. But I find it interesting that Albert's kids have had, inexplicable, especially in the case of seeing the humanoid forms in the house, very inexplicable events. Right. How did you handle that when they told you that? What did you say? Did you give them some advice? Or?
Well, I told them that immediately tell me about it. I would like to know what they saw. And actually, one of the experiences, the one with the guy wearing the monk habit, I included in my reports because he was so sincere about it and so worried about it. I told him, look, maybe what you saw is some kind of friendly entity that just wanted to communicate with you, so not to worry about it. But I encouraged them to tell me if they or any of their friends see or encounter anything. Yeah.
Have you had any cases that have been referred to you by your work? In other words, maybe a report comes in, people know of your interest, or think, well, maybe we should have Albert check into this. Have you had any cases like that referred to you?
Yeah, 2 or 3. I had a case in which a security guard, this is back in '89. I didn't actually talk to the guy, but I talked to him on the phone later on. The security guard encountered 3 in a shopping center. This is about 3 o'clock in the morning, in a shopping center in South Dade off of US 1. 3 tall humanoids, thin, long arms with huge cat-like eyes, and he called the police because he thought it was prowlers or suspicious people. And
cat burglars.
Yeah. And I believe police responded to the site, and they wrote a report. I used to have a copy of the police report. I don't know what I did with it. Perhaps I lost it when I lost half of my... I used to have like I said, a huge collection of books and magazines, but I went through a divorce, and I don't want to go into details, but I lost a lot of my material. Yeah.
I hate when that happens.
For 58 years, Fate has provided true reports of the strange and unknown. Fate brings you the latest in all aspects of the paranormal, like angels and miracles, psychic phenomena, ghosts, UFOs, and much, much more. To receive your complimentary Fate magazine, call now at 1-800-728-2730 or visit their website at www.fatemag.com. That's 1-800-728-2730 or www.fatemag.com. What are you waiting for? Your fate awaits.
Hi, this is Don Ecker, and you are tuned into the Paracast. Let me tell you what, you're going to hear stuff here that you probably won't hear anywhere else. Hear that, George Snorri?
Albert Rosales, Humanoid researcher, experiencer, our co-host Christopher O'Brien. Albert, we don't have a lot of time, and maybe we should look into the end game here for you. Do you intend to maybe collect this into a book? Everybody's written a book about UFOs. I wrote a book once about the hollow earth that I was going to publish myself, and something happened, and maybe it was my first marriage ending, and I never got around to it. So is there a book in your future, Albert?
I'm hoping there will be. I'm hoping to put all my stuff together into a some kind of a catalog of cases, into a case catalog, but I would imagine it will have to be several volumes of a book.
15,000 reports, I would hope so. Yeah, that would be an awful big book.
Yeah, I know. But I'm trying to type some journals now that I'm working on, and I think a couple of them are going to be published in the magazines, and that new magazine UFO Matrix. I don't know if you guys heard about in the UK, but I'm working on journals, and I'm hoping, maybe in the future I could write a couple books. Maybe when I retire. Who knows?
Keep adding to that database. It sounds like it grows monthly. It's pretty amazing, some of the stuff reported around the world, boy.
Yeah.
All right, so maybe you'll collect this stuff. Now, that's an important point, too. What about the existing UFO investigative bodies like MUFON? Do they ever call Albert and say, hey, look into this, or what do you have? Give us more information?
Well, I can tell you that MUFON, they always want me to be a member. Of course, when I ask them for assistance in collecting cases, they never answer. They have a new president now in the MUFON, a new leader, which I haven't contacted yet. I'll see if I have better luck. But I've been a member of MUFON on and off, and right now I'm not. I don't think that the last MUFON president was. Hey, this is the kind of guy that maybe they'll contact you. I will contact MUFON for assistance in getting cases, getting more information on some other humanoid cases. I will never get an answer. However, they will contact me and asking me to either become a member or, assist in with files and join MUFON for a long stint. I did for 2 years, but then I stopped. Now, there's not that many. There are a lot of researchers like you, Chris, and many others that I could think of, and Stan Gordon in Pennsylvania, and Druffel in California. There's many good researchers out there, which are doing a great job. But as far as a large UFO groups or organizations, at least in the U.S., there isn't that many. I know in Europe there's more groups, a lot of groups actually in Europe, and there's more what I think interest over there in the matter.
Is MUFON the only game in town, pretty much, as far as major UFO investigative bodies? What about the Center for UFO Studies? Is that still even around?
They're still around, but I don't think they even publish a journal anymore. They used to. I don't think they do anything anymore, actually.
Gene, you know where the largest UFO group in the world is, right? China. China has the largest membership rolls of any other UFO group. I forget. It's huge. I remember seeing the number once and scratching my head going, wow, this is really quite an emerging there's a lot of emerging interest in China in these types of events, and which brings me to a question, Albert. Do you have any contacts with any of the Chinese and Far Eastern groups? Have they funneled you any sort of cases? I know this Michael Cohen guy seems to be coming up with new China stuff all the time. A lot of it is questionable. But
I don't know
do you
what
have
he
any?
gets but I haven't had any contacts from China. No, I had some contacts like Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia. But I used to have contact in Japan, I don't know what happened with that, but I know I haven't been able to get any Chinese contacts. But
now, years ago, Albert and Chris, I used to be in touch with a number of people in Japan, and they spoke English pretty well. Otherwise, I'd be severely crippled in trying to communicate with them. And there were active UFO investigative bodies in Japan. Do we still see that, or have they gone by the wayside like many of the UFO organizations in the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think there's one group, I think it's called UFO Japan, but I don't think they speak any English, because I try to contact them. I send them some of my cases, and I send them a couple emails, but I never got any response from them. But they do have quite a large website and database, but all in Japanese, and I don't know about any others. No.
In general, isn't that unfortunate, the fact that we don't have really international UFO bodies? Like MUFON supposedly is international, but it's mostly in the USA and hasn't been as active maybe in some areas as it should be. What about that? What's the problem that we can't get all these disparate bodies together and try to figure it out together?
I don't know. I'm thinking maybe the different point of views everywhere. They can't agree to. I mean, there's some people that some groups got their agenda, their theories, their pet theories, and they just don't accept the other theories or agendas, and they just can't get together. I don't know. It's unfortunate. It is, and a lot of the researchers don't like to share their information either, which I think is unfortunate. They keep their information, and then when if they stop researching or go away or pass away, and then their research goes to naught. It's lost. Nobody ever hears about it. And I know of that happening before to all the APRO files and the old APRO group. Jim and Carol.
I know where all those files are. I've been trying to get access to them for about 6-7 years.
Where are they? Okay, APRO is centered in Tucson, Arizona, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. Jim and Carl Lorenzen were started in the 50s, covered a lot of cases in South America, a lot of really cutting-edge information, a lot of people helping them out. Now, I have to tell you that Jim Lorenzen was a really gentle guy. I hated Cora Lorenzen, never got along with her for some reason. Really crusty old lady. I was going to say old, you know what, but I won't. But okay.
She wore the pants.
Well, yeah, whatever. Okay, so what happened to these records? Where are they now? You've been trying for years to get a hold of them, Chris. Where are the records being stored?
Well, they're in a storage facility whose location is a closely guarded secret. There's a couple that live here that worked with the Lorenzens towards the end of their life. Both Cora and Jim died fairly close together in time. And when I'm trying to see if I can get the story straight here. So when the Lorenzens died, I think APRO did continue on for a while, but then without their motivation and stuff, it floundered fairly quickly. This couple was for some reason selected by the board, and I think Hynek was involved in the selection as well in this process, and they were entrusted with the APRO files, which they have been promising for years to give investigators and researchers access to the information to do checking for data. And I, as a favor to them, I did a number of video shoots. They were fighting a subdivision that was being planned here in the Sedona area, and they had a real legitimate beef with the developer, and so I helped film some environmental quality meetings with the understanding that, hey, quid pro quo, I'll help you guys out if you look up these 3 cases for me. And I mentioned Ted Phillips' Czechoslovakian case with the machine in the mountain. Ray Stanford had a case, and I had a case that we really needed to get into those APRO files because we knew that what we were looking for was contained in there. And they promised me, and they never came through. There are a couple of flakes. I even said, I'll go in there and look at it. You can blindfold me, take me there. I don't need to know where it is. You can open the door. I can walk in, take the blindfold off, and let me check. and they're just sitting on it. They think that I really don't know why they have, what their rationale is for not allowing researchers to have access to these. There's a gold mine of information in there.
You know what, Chris, you're kind of sitting here and sometimes this germinates into greater ideas, greater good. Maybe we should all come up with a petition to present to these people. Paracast listeners, not just Paracast, any radio show, listen to us.
Let's put some pressure on them.
Let's put the pressure. I mean, really, we have tens and tens and tens of thousands of listeners around the world. We're soon going to be syndicated by a national network, available at local radio stations. We have this information. I don't have to know the location. I don't have to know the name of the people. But we should set up, I'm going to assign you Chris O'Brien. You could work with Albert, anybody else, to do this. Let's set up a petition. Let's make our voices heard to the people who are holding the information. All these decades of research by the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, UFO sightings around the world, close encounters, great cases from South America, all the work the Lorenzens did, all the people who work with them did. Let's find a way to persuade these people to release that information, maybe a petition. Chris, maybe you can assemble a petition, an online petition. We'll run it. We'll give a link to anybody who wants to run it on their sites, ladies and gentlemen. If you are on a rival radio show, this is not a matter of competition. We want to get this information available to everyone, and I can't see any reason for it not happening. So, Chris, you want to take that assignment publicly on the show?
That's a great idea, Gene. I'd be happy to do that, and thank you for coming up with that idea. I think if we put some pressure on them, and they'll see, I don't think they realize how important that particular database is. It's one of the largest ufologically based databases in the world. There are, I think they said, 15 file cabinets, if I remember correctly, of actual case files, and that's a lot of paperwork. This is, of course, back in the old hard copy days.
Now, this is probably sitting there in some kind of storage center they pay a monthly fee for, unless it's in their own garage.
I have a feeling it's down in the Phoenix area. That would be my guess. Is it's down in Phoenix somewhere. Of course, they are up here in Sedona, and I think, they get up at noon. They're kind of old hippie types. They're real flaky. They don't like to, they'll fight for their causes and do the right thing. But then, it's forest for the trees when it comes to that absolutely just amazing database that they're sitting on and hoarding. I really don't understand how somebody could do that and make promises and then